Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We've got another stream today. We're going to talk all about player prompts. So this will be mostly, but not exclusively, for GMs. And the more I think about the topic, the more different angles that I've come up with to talk about it from. So that's really exciting. And I am eager to hear from y'all who are watching any questions or thoughts you have about the topic as well. First, a quick round of shout outs to Keckler, Selby's, 3Zs, and Hatchling DM for following the channel over the last week. I appreciate your support. Hope to see you on a stream if possible. Otherwise, enjoy the VODs. And that is that. So we can go ahead and dive right in. I have one of these. Nope, it's not working. Okay. I'm not super happy with OBS right now because it keeps losing my settings, right? I set up this camera to work and then it's like, no, I can't use this camera. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never met her. So that's kind of frustrating, but we persevere. I will not being able to share my notes or share my screen as notes is a little frustrating, but hopefully I can recap on things and I can certainly put some things into chat. But if you can bear with me, we will persevere and get rolling. So first, kind of rather than painting the scene, which we'll talk about painting the scene, I want to start by just establishing my terms real quick. So by player prompts, I mean broadly anytime when somebody is asking a player or a character directly to comment on something in the game or to add something to the game, right? Where when a player is prompted to action or to description. And so that might be as simple as like a critical role, ask how do you want to do this, right? You've defeated the enemy. I want to give you the chance to do a cool like cinematic kill. But a player prompt is also, what are you thinking right now? A player prompt is, what is your character's response to whatever is happening? A player prompt might be on a ability or a domain card or some feature that you have. All right, something like Bold Presence, Soldier's Bond, or Mending Touch, where there is a roleplay prompt on an ability, and that ability or feature asks you to do a bit of narration or role playing, and then there's some mechanics that go with it, right? My inspiration deck idea that I showed off in the design lab is very much a prompt-driven subsystem for Daggerheart. Here we're talking about prompts more broadly, but I'm going to use a lot of Daggerheart examples because that's where kind of my main audience is, right? Most of the folks that are here are Daggerheart fans or interested in that game. So a lot of player prompts end up being from the GM, right? The GM is the one who is prompting a player to comment or to add something. And here I want to distinguish a little bit from the GM generally calling upon a player to contribute and the types of prompts that I'm focusing on here, which is less what is your character doing now, but more things that are a little bit more targeted or a little bit more tightly framed, where you're prompting specific types of actions a little bit more than you are just kind of offering somebody the spotlight or pointing the spotlight at their character. And so, right, a difference I might make is, okay, cool. So let's say Selbyz is playing. Selbyz, your character hasn't had the spotlight in a while. What do you want to do here? Or maybe we take the spotlight over to Selbyz's character. What do you think? Right, I'm prompting action, but it's not quite the same as the player prompts in the way that I want to talk about it here. So there's a little bit of disambiguation to be done, but I think we can hone in on it and make it work. These kinds of prompts can range in how much they are putting the player or the character on the spot. So the Daggerheart core rulebook talks about softer moves and harder moves. Here we're just gonna where's my thing? I'm gonna put this here for a minute, right? Because we're gonna talk CGL stuff. We're going to talk stuff in the SRD. Daggerheart core book talks about a range of moves from softer to harder. A softer move is one that is more setting up, description. It is the kind of wind up. And then a harder move is more direct action, aggressive action. Prompts can also range from softer to harder. A really hard prompt is... so here I'm going to reference the Calamity miniseries of Critical Role. There's a lot of very famous lines, but one of them is your arm weakest at the elbow or the shoulder? Because then that's the thing that breaks, right, is how that prompt goes. That is a pretty hard prompt. It is giving the player the chance to cut their own cake so that they can be, or pour your own drink so you can be drowned in it, right? It is, you get some choice in the thing that's going to be terrible, right? A hard choice in some ways is a harder prompt. Hello, Kevin Gamini. Thanks for joining. We're talking about player prompts today, often from the GM, but more broadly, kind of ways that we're pulling out and enticing and kind of sharing spotlight with other players to kind of encourage them to contribute. Or, as I'm talking about right now, right, a harder framed prompt is giving somebody a little bit of choice within a bad situation. So a somewhat harder player prompt that I often use that is kind of just in tune with GMing in general is if a player rolls like in Daggerheart, a failure with fear, right? It's going to get a harder response from me as the GM. I might soften that a little bit by giving the player some agency in it and asking them, what do you think went wrong? A lot of times the player will have an idea of what could go wrong with their action, and they might come up with a consequence that's meaner than what I've come up with. But I'm giving them some agency as a collaborator, as a co-storyteller, and letting them do a little bit of calibrating how rough they want the consequences to be. A player prompt that's a bit harder could also be your tough choice, right? In this moment, you can either hold on to the artifact or you can hold on to your friend, this fellow PC, right? You have to hold on to the ledge above, and you can reach the artifact, or you can offer a hand down to your friend, and you can help pull them up. Or you can leave them to figure it out and climb up on their own, or you can get that artifact, right? A tough choice between two priorities. And tough choices are going to be more effective if they are effectively a question of what is your priority in this moment, right? What does your motivation lead you to do? Or what are you going to do in spite of what you've already established about a character's motivation or their goals or their fears and hopes? Ultimately, the thing that I'm trying to get to in talking about player prompts today is a method of sharing spotlight, trying to dig deeper in storytelling, and a method of getting more comfortable passing the mic around, right? Sharing narrative authority, and as a player, getting used to accepting that prompt and not freezing when you're given the prompt, and instead being able to smoothly shift your focus a little bit to think more broadly about the story if you've been focused really on your character, and to think about what a prompt is getting at in terms of the larger story that you all are telling together. being able to shift that mindset and kind of pull back from, here I'm going to do some stance theory, right? From an actor stance where you're thinking as the character back to more like a writer-author stance where you're thinking about telling the story together. A lot of prompts are toward the player rather than the character, right? What do you, the player, think is going to happen? Or a player character prompt that is to the character, what did you do, or what are you going to do now? Asking prompts and presenting them to players or to characters are both useful. You're going to use them in different circumstances. Some of the things in Daggerheart are going to be prompts that are focused in one way or the other. The prompts I'm thinking about from domain abilities are mostly for the player to narrate for the character rather than prompts directly to the character within character. There's some variation, right? If you share something, then you get this better ability. Well, that's to the character. But in those moments, because we are engaging the mechanical and the fictional layer together, there's certainly the space to step back into that player-author stance and then return to the fiction once you've made your decision. I think that a player prompt, or a prompt that is presented to the player, also gives that person a little bit of room to not feel like they have to be an actor and a writer in the same moment, right? If they're thinking about what move to make in the story, especially if it's a move that's not just what my character is doing, giving them space where they don't have to also be performing as that character may make it a little easier to not feel like you're on the spot, to not freeze, to not feel paralyzed by choice. Choice paralysis is something I will talk about with another type of prompts, which are some of my favorite. A thing with prompts here is that the more tightly framed your prompts that you use, the less your kind of fellow players are likely to be caught up or blocked by choice paralysis, right? By having too many different options. If your prompt is really narrowly framed or tightly framed, there's only so many options because everything has to be within this idea or within this context. And what I mean by this is, if your prompt is, what is your character feeling right now? That's about a specific situation, but there's a bunch of different ways that you can go in that kind of in that moment. A prompt like, what do you do now, is also extremely open. A prompt to a player of, what would you like more of in the story, is also really loose, right? If you're asking during like an episode, like during a session wind down, right? Doing stars and wishes, stars calling out cool things or moments from other players that you enjoyed, wishes talking about things you would like to see in the game in the future or you want to see more of in the future. Does anybody have any wishes is a pretty broadly framed prompt at the player level. If you're finding that your players are not as comfortable engaging with those more open prompts, you might try to get more narrow. And this is largely speaking to GMs, but not necessarily only to GMs, because if you're trying to find moments to pass the spotlight to another player, as a player, you might do that through a prompt that expresses your own curiosity. Well, I'm really interested in what Nick's character is going to do now. Well, that's pretty broad. I might, as a player, say instead, well, I'm really curious what Nick's character is going to do given that this thing just happened and we know that Nick's character, something in their backstory, right? I, as the player, am thinking about like, oh, based on my understanding of who this character is and what they've done and what their past is, I'm really curious what they're going to do in response to this thing, where I'm setting some expectations that there's going to be an interesting response here, and I am reminding my fellow player of the context of what has just happened, especially if it's something where a thing that happened during the campaign then relates to a thing that that player has expressed or said in character. It's basically a wish or a request from one of your co-storytellers. Hey, I feel like you're set up to do something here. I want to know what that's going to be. Or you're asking the player to step up or to kind of take up some space, take the spotlight in order to deliver something, create an emotional moment or a response or some action that fulfills the promise or the expectations or the curiosity that was fostered or created previously in the story. Right? A more harshly or a more firmly placed prompt would be something like, are you going to let them say something like that given what they did to your brother? Right? And that might even be a character-to-character prompt as a way for the player to express their curiosity. One character says that to another character, or the player says it to the character through the lens of the player, right? Because players don't speak within the fiction to characters in the same way that GMs don't speak within the fiction to characters unless they're speaking through the voice of a player, of a non-player character, or if you have a campaign where the disembodied voice of the GM is something that exists within the fiction, right? Maybe a comedy campaign or something like that. One of the simplest types of prompts to get people to buy in on, in my experience, are specific action prompts in the moment where all I'm asking is, what is your character doing? Not even what is your character feeling or how do you react to this? What does your character do in this moment to accomplish or complete a thing that we've already set up? Right? That is, how do you want to do this? That is, oh, amazing. You rolled a crit. What does it look like as you totally, ace this thing that you're trying to do, right? I'm passing the mic. I'm giving the spotlight to the player. I'm trying to validate and enhance and kind of celebrate a win and give the player to a chance to kind of collect their flowers or showcase their character, show off, get to take a little bit of a victory lap. Because the thing that I'm asking for there is just play as your character more, or just give us a little bit more detail in what it is that you do as a character. That for me feels like it's the smallest extension of the types of actions or the types of descriptions that many players are going to start most comfortable doing, right? Where when you begin, you're thinking, what does my character do, right? You're really focused in because it might be overwhelming to try to think about everything at once. If I'm prompting the player to then answer, what is your character thinking? Or I ask the character, what are you thinking in this moment? Or what are you going to do about X? In that, I think that it is a little bit asking more from the player. It might be a little bit more putting them on the spot in a way that some players are not going to be as comfortable with. And of course, everybody is different and people have different interests and experiences. So take all of this with a grain of salt. It's going to be really specific based on who the people are in question, right? I'm just trying to think about kind of a progression of the types of prompts that you can use, how they might create difficulty or where they might sit within a spectrum of prompts. Stepping even farther into co-storyteller, asking the player to kind of operate on the writer stance level, is to do some shared description. And here is where paint the scene tends to come up. Paint the scene, as I've said on other streams, is like a GMing or storytelling technique created by Jason Cordova, who's the designer of Brindlewood Bay and The Between and Trophy Gold, and then some other stuff. Paint the Scene is a prompt that is presented to the whole table to answer as the players. The prompt calls for them to detail, describe, or add something to a scene toward a ideally toward a thematic or tonal or content end. The example that I tend to use, and apologies if you've heard this too many times, so it goes. In a superhero game, your characters are trying to kind of track down a villain, and they've heard that people who worked with that villain go to this bar called the Glassjaw. And as the GM, I describe, all right, so you find the Glassjaw, you walk down a set of kind of scummy concrete stairs to a basement dive bar. And as you step in, we're going to paint the scene. The prompt for Paint the Scene here is, how can we tell that this is a supervillain henchperson bar? Not, how can we tell that this is a bar in a superhero world, right? It's narrower than that. It is, how can we tell that this is a bar where the hench people that work for supervillains go and drink and hang out, right? I'm intimating and suggesting a fair amount just from that prompt, and I'm limiting the answers so that ideally it's easier for players to come up with ideas within those bounds, because I'm not asking them to answer something that's really broad and vague or where there's just too many options. You're in a bar. We have superheroes. We know there are hench people here. It is a bar for hench people. And I've already given some context of this is a basement bar. It's kind of a scummy entrance. I've framed it as a dive bar. So I've given a few more details as well. And one of the things you can do with Paint the Scene is you can provide a rough description and then go into your Paint the Scene as a way to fill out the description. Again, that is just another way to provide a bit more of a firm bounding box so that the players know what is being asked of them. Another thing you can do in Paint the Scene is you can offer to provide the first detail as the GM to try to get the players' minds rolling of like, oh, okay, this is what they mean, right? An answer that's sort of like this. Or if you have a player in your group that you are pretty sure is comfortable engaging with prompts like this, you might, at least the first few times that you do Paint the Scene or something like it, ask that player if they're comfortable going first, because then they can be a little bit of a leader within the group and provide that example. And that I prefer to providing the first example as a GM, because when I go to a player first, I feel like I am I'm kind of holding on more lightly. I'm making more of an open space for the players to step into that role of co-storyteller or to take the spotlight already being a co-storyteller. Cordova talks about Paint the Scene prompts in some of these games and in some podcasts and things as a way to try to reinforce or speak to theme for the campaign, or to talk about like tone or content. Paint the Scene prompts show up a lot in the between. And there is a particular type that is the unseen. And this is an interesting kind of cinematic flourish where you jump back and forth between player character scenes and scenes with no player characters, where the group together answers a series of prompts to fill out or to detail a scene that is meant to be thematically resonant with, but plot-wise completely unconnected to what is happening in the main action, right? It's a cinematic, specifically a cinematic technique. In other contexts, we might call it a literary technique, but I think the cinematic comparison is more apt because of the visual juxtaposition in rapid, like back and forth that for me is much easier to do in a visual medium, right? This type of juxtaposition you could also do in sequential art or comics, right? You could alternate panels between two scenes and then use that juxtaposition to create some associations. There's a specific term for this that I don't remember exactly at the moment. If you do remember this term, then please go ahead and shout it out. And welcome, Asteria NYC. I am glad that you're excited about Paint the Scene. If you do get to use it and are in another stream or want to comment on a YouTube video, I would love to hear how it goes for you. So Paint the Scene is something I talk about a lot for Daggerheart because I find that it is a really useful structure within a larger menu of different types of player prompts where I can specifically flag that it's something that I want everybody to contribute to. I make it less pressure on any one player by saying this is something the whole table is going to do. It's not just me putting one person on the spot and making them carry the whole weight of the prompt. And I make it easier to engage with because I'm trying to frame it a bit more tightly, and I'm framing it possibly with some narrative intent that I may declare to the players, right? Like I want to do a Paint the Scene prompt to really convey how much the world of superheroes is an everyday thing in this world, right? Where being a hench person to a supervillain is just another job. And there's a lot of job-based bars, right? Firefighter bars, cop bars, lawyer bars, probably, right? Fancier bars. And so if a hench person bar is a working class occupational bar, that helps say something about what superheroes mean and the role that superheroes and supervillains have within this world. So I find that trying to hit that thematic angle with Paint the Scene is especially good if I can. And I try to, especially when I'm teaching somebody about Paint the Scene, to say, this is often done toward this kind of an end. And then we can develop fluency in Paint the Scene prompts as a group together. And then I can ask more and more of the group by trying to use Paint the Scene to carry a little bit more of the dramatic, thematic, narrative weight of the story. Yeah, finding the balance of when to prompt and how much responsibility or how much accountability, like how much weight of the story a player is comfortable carrying while trying to develop that muscle or kind of encourage players to get comfortable taking on a little bit more can be quite tricky because it involves, in my experience, doing a lot of like reading of people's body language and tone of voice and thinking about what your relationship is with this person, right? How well do you know them? How well do they know you? How much trust do they have in you and the other players that nobody is going to make fun of you if you say something that maybe isn't, the best idea, that it either, falls flat a little bit, or it shows that you misremembered something or that you didn't understand the prompt perfectly. When we are playing Daggerheart and a lot of other games, and we're doing this, right? This is just a sub part of a larger behavior, right? I think it is best if we are a fan of one another as players, right? We want our fellow players to succeed, and we want to give them the benefit of the doubt when they go out on a limb. If you are playing with people who you have known for a very long time, and everybody is very comfortable with each other, and there is already a culture of affectionately poking fun at one another, then it might be fine to poke fun at somebody if the idea that they had was not super great. especially if that person says a thing is like, no, not a fan of that. But identifying that an idea is not good is not getting to the better idea. It might be a step on the process there, but mostly the thing I want to come back to based on Asterion NYC's comment is that if we're trying to foster a culture of collaboration and help people develop those skills so that they're comfortable adding to the narrative and taking some of that narrative authority, we don't want to punish the behavior we are looking for. So if somebody tries the thing, in my opinion, it is better to celebrate that or to try to build on it and validate it than it is to demand the highest standard from people from the beginning and push back on them or critique them for an idea that is maybe only okay. Now, pushback against something that is hurtful or like out of tone, that's a different question, right? Oh, I wonder if that's a little bit close to this veil we have here or this line we have here. That's a different question. Just going to take a drink real quick, so I will mute. So a lot of what you have in Paint the Scene, you can also adjust to a single player prompt. In a game that I'm running, we recently got to one of the player characters' hometowns. And so I asked that player to give us some description, or, asked her on the way there, oh, well, what do your people do for like security around your village, right? That is me asking the player to do some world building or to show the world building that, in this case, she has already thought of or done in developing the character, because I want to give that player some more authority over a part of the world that she has already created in making a character who is from a place, right? That place existed through this player's creativity. And so I'm kind of holding back and reaffirming that player's relative authority over this part of the setting, even though we are all building the setting together. I want to give that player a chance to build on what she's already done. Some players are more excited about that than others, right? Some players will, they'll come up with a rough idea and then they want the GM to fill in the rest. Where that line sits is going to be something that you're going to need to negotiate and discuss with your table. In my experience and in my preference, when I'm playing something like Daggerheart, and especially when I'm playing, like more broadly, when I'm playing a game that is play to find out, story driven, in the PPTA or Forged in the Dark tradition, I want to leave more of the world to be kind of claimed or staked out or spoken for by the players. And then I facilitate, I draw connections, I do some additional world building, right? Even GMing at my loosest and most hands-off, I am still creating new NPCs, I'm acting on behalf of factions, I might be creating those factions, or I might just be deciding how they're going to act, right? There's a lot of creation and some authorship still as a GM, even in a game where I'm imbuing or I'm ceding a lot of narrative authority to the players, right? There are going to be some folks who are playing some games where it's even more removed from that, but I'm comfortable kind of still doing a fair bit of that, especially if I'm like running a game on Start Playing, right? Because then I'm providing a paid service. Part of that paid service pretty consistently is that I am a skilled and experienced facilitator, and that I'm going to help players be able to create cool things with that additional authority that they've been granted, right? I'm going to help them use that authority, and we're going to tell the story together. I'm not just providing a service of, I have shown up with a big folder. Let's pretend this is a folder instead of a bunch of cards, right? Here's my big folder of story. It's not just that I'm doing. So we have softer to harder prompts. We have kind of world building or shared description prompts, including paint the scene. There's like motivation and reaction prompts. What do you feel about this? What does character name have to say here? How can on a specific success or a specific failure, I might, as a GM, try to slow down the action to linger on a character's emotional response to something. Or I'm just going to express my curiosity. What is your character feeling right now based on, right, these things that are happening? Because that specifically shows interest, right? I am being a fan of the character. I'm creating an opportunity for the player to share interiority or express interiority for that character. Some cultures of play and player styles will be more forthcoming with interiority, speaking kind of on the co-author level. My character is feeling this right now. Or it might be expressed as, you can tell from, and then there's some description of the character action. You can tell from this description that my character is XYZ. Or you might even turn it into kind of almost like a ping pong or tennis prompt kind of a thing, where I'm prompted and then I say, well, you, other character, would especially know that when I do this, it means that I'm feeling like that. Because that's including that other character in this moment and opening the door for them to respond and react in character to my character's reaction. I'm expanding the scene. I'm accepting the prompt, but then I'm sharing the moment with another player. Something I want to talk about that is Daggerheart specific is some of these prompts on abilities. So a soldier's bond, the blade domain ability at level 2, asks you, or kind of says that if you compliment someone on some, like, especially it's like, their martial prowess or something like that, you compliment someone and then you each gain 3 hope. Or with mending touch, you can heal somebody, but if in the scene where you're healing them, you learn something about them, then your healing ability is better. In bold presence, you can add your strength trait score, that bonus, to a presence roll if you describe how your bold presence helps you in this moment. In a fair number of different features or cards or other kind of mechanical bits of Daggerheart, the fictional and the mechanical are tied together through a prompt. The feature says, the feature asks you to do some role playing or just some description or some narration or some world building, and then produces a mechanical output. That mechanical output manifests, the players and the GM figure out how it feeds back into the fiction, and our loop is complete and we continue. We begin and end with the fiction, right? In a fictional circumstance, you do something that activates one of your domain abilities. We resolve the mechanical element and we return to the fiction through that bit of description that you've done, right? Or whatever the effect is, knowing that there's been some description, right? So we can almost have multiple loops. Something happens in the fiction. I realize I can use a mechanic. I do the role play I'm being asked to back into the fiction, and then we resolve the mechanical manifestation of that thing, and then we return to the fiction again. I'm looking at my notes again. The last thing I wanted to talk about, this may be a short stream, which is fine because I have lots to do. When I am prepping Daggerheart or a lot of other games, I have built the practice of doing some prep through writing down prompt questions specifically for characters. But the way I express them are, these are things that I'm curious about as the GM and as the player. And I'm going to present them very much to the player about the character. I will also write paint the scene prompts sometimes, especially for key scenes or sequences. Right? If there's a scene where I know we're going to be spending a good amount of time in this space or in this situation, I might write a paint the scene prompt to give everybody ownership over that scene and that place, and so that it is more thoroughly detailed, so that people feel like it is a more fully realized place and are more comfortable improvising or kind of inhabiting their character within that space. Writing prompts that express my curiosity also help me remember where I was thinking and what I was curious about when I was doing my prep. Oh, when I was thinking, I was curious about what this character would do in this place, or I realized that this would be a great time to ask a player to do a bit of world building because their character is from the place, or here's something that relates to their character, right? A prompt might be something like, as we move into this region of the woods, and now, in this moment, I ask the ranger, what dangerous creatures have you heard are known to be predators in this part of the woods or this part of the Witherwild, right? In a Witherwild campaign that I'm asking. Because the ranger background prompts, right? And these are also player prompts. I just have talked about them in a different place, so I'm not going to linger on them here. One of the ranger class background questions is about, the target of your first hunt almost killed you, and then there's a great beast in another prompt. Because the player has already been primed to think on that level, and a lot of rangers are hunters, and there's class abilities and things like that gesture in that direction, asking that type of a prompt or presenting that type of a prompt to a ranger character can reaffirm what kind of a person they are. Depending on exactly who the ranger is, right? It might be calling toward part of the class that they have more of a connection to or less of a connection to. I will often use prompts as a way to try to even out the spotlight in a game if during that session one player has not gotten a lot of spotlight, right? We'll move through the action. I'll realize that I want to bring somebody into the spotlight more. And then if I don't have an idea how to do it from within the context of the scene already, I might take a little bit of a step back to the core storyteller level and ask something that's a little bit less related. Use that prompt to try to give that player a chance to take the spotlight if they want it. And then if they take that prompt and give me an answer, I try to fold it into what I'm already doing in the scene, especially if I can do so in a way that continues to grant that player the chance to take some spotlight through their character, or just some spotlight as a co-storyteller, right? The characters only have feelings within the narrative. If the player is involved and gets to tell the story, even if their character is not doing as much, the player is still involved. And different players are probably going to want to be involved through their character to a greater or lesser degree. I, with my background as a GM and a novelist, am often fine being a collaborator and contributor on the co-storyteller level, even if I'm not getting a lot of spotlight on my individual character, because I'm still telling a story together with friends, even if my character is not in a given scene. And moving and operating on this prompt level is a great way to include players whose characters are not in this scene. So if you know that you're going to have the party split and like, okay, this 3-hour session is going to be kind of 90 minutes with one group and 90 minutes with another group. And especially if it's not set up for you to be able to jump back and forth between those groups, right, to kind of interleave their scenes beat by beat, using prompts as a way to involve and include the players whose characters are not in that scene can be a great way to keep everybody kind of mentally present and give those other players something to do when they don't have a character to kind of act through in that scene. So I think without further examples, this is probably about what I have to say, but I have some announcements this time. So I'm going to go grab some things on Blue Sky and elsewhere so that I can share those announcements here. The first one is that I am going to be GMing a game of Daggerheart on stream. This is a charity game raising funds for Feeding America. I'm going to be GMing a game using the Beast Feast campaign frame with Rowan from Dodoborn, yes, as well as Mick from The Naturals, Daniel from Bladebound Saga, and Kai Kagawa, who you might know from Transplanar. Kai is also a streamer in their own regard and has done some kind of work in the ttrpg space, kind of as a like a writer, creator, editor type of person. If you are at all interested in costuming and how costuming impacts storytelling, Kai has been streaming on that topic, and you should definitely check it out. And if you are not familiar with Dodoborn, Naturals, or Bladebound Saga, then after watching the game, you can go and check out the respective shows of all of these lovely players. That charity game is going to be next Monday, the 19th, starting at 5 p.m. Eastern, so 2 p.m. Pacific. If you are there, you will be eligible for some giveaways because it's a charity game. If you are going to be there and be present, I would invite you to think about what you might have in your budget to be able to donate to Feeding America. As right, this idea kind of came together when there was a lot of worry about SNAP payments being cut off, right? We're a little bit separated from that, but hunger and food insecurity is an ongoing issue in the United States, among other places. So, right, it's always a good time to raise funds to fight hunger and food insecurity. So I'm very excited to be a part of that, working with the folks at the Naturals who are doing a lot of the logistics and hosting and things like that. And next Tuesday, so I've got kind of a banger, a big week coming up. Next Tuesday, I will be releasing the first of my Menagerie of Mayhem supplements. This is going to be the first kind of book length. It's a short book. My first full supplement for use with the Daggerheart rules, right, using the community gaming license. This is going to be 35 new adversaries for use with the Daggerheart rules across tiers 1 through 4. And I'm using art from the incredible Tanya Herrero from a stock art collection. And I'm very excited to have this out in the world. If you are a patron over at patreon.com/MichaelRUnderwood, if you're a patron at $10 USD or more, you already have access to this PDF. Patrons got this early by about 2 weeks, and then it's going to go on sale retail at itch.io, Heart of Daggers, and ideally Drive-Thru RPG, though Drive-Thru sometimes takes a little bit longer. That's going to be wide release as of next Tuesday, so 6 days from now. So next Monday, charity actual play game. Next Tuesday, Menagerie of Mayhem #1, and then next Wednesday, I will be doing some kind of stream. Good chance that it will include some talking about Menagerie. So maybe it'll be like making new adversaries or talking about using adversaries or something like that. I haven't totally decided just yet, but those are my announcements. Thank you all for hanging out. Not a Hag, Asteria NYC, Kevin Gamini, and everybody else who is here. And also thank you to folks who are watching on the VOD, whether that is on Twitch or over on YouTube. And if you like this or my other streams and stuff that I have to say in video, then I would invite you to subscribe over at YouTube or follow here on Twitch. If you want to comment on the YouTube, especially if you have questions, then that is great. I welcome questions. Questions that are like about the stuff of streams. Definitely best place to go is YouTube, because that also tells me YouTube, to recommend that video to more people, because it shows that it has more engagement. Hello, PX Karan. So more activity over on YouTube tells YouTube that these videos are engaging and interesting to people. So commenting there is great. I believe that if you subscribe on YouTube and then you click the like notification bell, that's even better. But I understand that people want to like manage their notifications. I thought that was you, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I didn't want to get egg on my face by saying the wrong thing. Very good to hear from you. Hope to see you in other streams or chat about game stuff on YouTube comments or on Patreon or whatever. I hope the things are good for you and yours. And then I will extend that to everybody who is watching. And I will see you all next week. Thank you.